Hello and welcome to another analysis behind the news. Did you catch the mainstream media news coverage of U.S. Senator John McCain admitting that the New World Order is under enormous strain at the Brussels Forum? Yeah, me neither. I had to rely on a foreign news source that the Drudge Report had listed in order to find out about it. Of course, our own The New American picked this up and placed some great context to his comments. They write, with the New World Order under enormous strain, amid what he described as the titanic struggle with forces of radicalism, American and European globalists can't stand by and lament. We've got to be involved, McCain was quoted as saying by the online EU Observer. In other words, those who oppose his vision of globalism and big government are radical. Meanwhile, those who support his extremist vision of never-ending unconstitutional war, the erosion of national sovereignty, and an end run around the U.S. Constitution's limits of government are the moderates. At least that is what the failed GOP presidential contender wants people to believe. Speaking at the Brussels Forum, organized by the globalist German Marshall Fund, established with taxpayer money to promote globalism, McCain also promoted the long-term internationalist objective of deeper integration between the United States and the EU. The world cries out for American and European leadership via the EU and NATO, a UN subsidiary, McCain claimed. Unsurprisingly, both of these institutions are run by unaccountable and unelectable globalists who share McCain's fanatical devotion to the New World Order agenda, transnational governance, and globalism. I trust the EU, McCain continued, calling for more cooperation and more connectivity between the EU and the U.S. government. He also said the alliance between the U.S. government and the EU, which is facing a massive uprising and enjoys virtually no popular support according to polls, was one of the most important alliances. In a nod to one of the frequent criticisms aimed at the EU, McCain conceded that it had too many bureaucrats. However, he claimed there was not much bureaucracy and that the EU was not the only place on earth with that problem. So, leave it to a Republican senator from Arizona to expose the plans for globalization, never mind the fact that he supports them. It's important to keep these plans in mind anytime the U.S. government discusses foreign policy, especially under the auspices of free trade agreements. Speaking of which, the New York Times reported last week that a draft letter detailing potential changes to Nafta, the North American Free Trade Agreement that has decimated American manufacturing, was sent around to some members of Congress. The New York Times wrote, as I get on the right page here, the tone of the 8-page draft letter, which was reported by the Wall Street Journal, did not echo Mr. Trump's campaign speeches. Nowhere was there a mention of his threats to pull out of the agreement. They also wrote, Mr. Trump has often said that the United States could abandon NAFTA altogether if renegotiating it is not possible. But the hawkish rhetoric of the campaign has given way to more measured statements on trade from the administration that track more closely with the stance of many congressional Republicans who are avid promoters of free trade and deeply skeptical of policies they view as restrictive or protectionists. In terms of what we consider to be President Trump's economic nationalist objectives and what he has said previously about NAFTA, the list of negotiating terms was relatively benign, said Scott S. Linciomi, an international trade lawyer at White & Case. American business welcomed the additional specifics on trade policy. The details in the letter have whet our appetite for more, said John Murphy, Senior Vice President for International Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Folks, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has not met a globalist trade agreement that it didn't like. If they are in favor of Trump's proposed changes, then that should raise a red flag. Will we see an Americanist trade deal, or will we see a globalist trade deal? This draft letter seems to indicate that neoconservative globalists in the Republican leadership are having great influence on the Trump administration, which does not bode well for those Trump supporters who voted to throw out globalism. We'll keep a close eye on this and recommend that you do the same. For a bit of good news, the British people of the UK have finally seen their Prime Minister trigger Act 50, which is the official announcement that the UK is leaving the European Union. Now, 2 years of negotiations begin the process of extracting the tentacles of the EU from the governing bodies of the UK. The New American reported, critics, though, ridiculed the EU leaders and their threats, saying Britain would prosper from seceding from the unaccountable superstate, not to mention the myriad non-economic benefits gained by reclaiming national sovereignty and the rights of self-government. In fact, some EU critics even said Brexit would benefit those still trapped in the totalitarian-minded superstate. We're bringing back hope and freedom and justice for all of the peoples of the EU, and we're going to start in the United Kingdom, said member of the European Parliament Ray Finch with the UK Independence Party, which played a leading role in the successful Brexit vote for a British exit. On March 29th, British authorities delivered the formal letter to EU bosses in Brussels demanding secession under Article 50. In the British Parliament, the message was clear too. In accordance with the wishes of the British people, the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, declared UK Prime Minister Theresa May. This is an historic moment from which there can be no turning back. Britain is leaving the European Union. We are going to make our own decisions and our own laws. We are going to take control of the things that matter most to us. And we are going to take this opportunity to build a stronger, fairer Britain, a country that our children and grandchildren are proud to call home. And let's not forget that the EU was built in part by trade agreements, not unlike Nafta. Let's not be dragged into any more of these under either a Republican or a Democratic administration. The UK has had enough of this regional government usurping sovereignty from them. It's time we in the US took notice. To give you a further idea of why globalism is bad, consider another of the New American's articles. This one with the headline of, "Amid talk of huge funding cuts, ex-UN staffer calls for Amexit." They wrote, "President Donald Trump's effort to slash U.S. tax funding for the United Nations by at least half does not go nearly far enough," according to a former UN staffer who saw the horror show that is the UN up close and personal. Instead, the ex-UN official argued the United States must withdraw completely from the dangerous, scandal-plagued global body that threatens human rights, human life, and even the well-being of the world. Having less than a full American exit or Amexit will leave Americans as accomplices to the atrocities. The reason for the harsh words is simple. The UN is filled with corrupt, racist, and criminal staff who engage in monstrous crimes and abuses, including the rape of children, all with impunity, said former UN staffer Polovi Katodi-McHugh. And so, by funding the UN, American taxpayers are facilitating and even financing gross human rights abuses. Indeed, U.S. taxpayers might even be considered accomplices to the UN's savage crimes, she argued, pointing to, among other atrocities, the sexual abuse and exploitation of children by UN peace troops across Africa. So, Senator McCain and his ilk can keep their globalist aims of a new world order. The American people have shown the resolve that they have when a clear choice of between globalism or Americanism is given. Let's continue to show the electorate that they can have just as clear a choice now as they did in November. However, their choice made today will be much more long-lasting and require a bit more work. Of course, we're talking about joining the John Birch Society, a clear choice for patriotic Americans looking to bring back Americanism and trump globalism. Pun intended, of course. So visit jbs.org and join today. And be sure to like and share this video with family and friends. Sign up for our e-newsletters and subscribe to our social media channels. Until next time, we'll see you then.